Yoga Journal published an article. Her name is Wolf Terry, and her argument was that getting vaccinated was an act of nonviolence, and she used the Sanskrit term ahimsa. It's a really reasonably written article, very mild-mannered, well-argued. She writes, just to give you a taste of it, based on everything I've learned about the pandemic, it seemed that COVID-19 and the collective risk the virus has on the population was proof that we are all truly connected. The health and wellness of those around me can and do affect me personally, and my health could impact others too. When it was time for me to decide whether or not to get the COVID-19 vaccine as a yoga practitioner and teacher, I turned to the values instilled through my practice. It was clear that my duty was throughout the pandemic to practice ahimsa, nonviolence, non-harm. So to me, getting vaccinated against a rampant virus that has killed more than 4 million people around the world felt like the ultimate exercise of the first ethical discipline of the yamas. She's referring to principles laid out in a number of Iron Age texts, ethical principles. By protecting myself against COVID-19, I was in turn protecting my loved ones, my community, and the world at large. Sounds very reasonable.
Obvious shill for Big Pharma.
She was punished roundly on social media, especially when Yoga Journal flagged this article with a little teaser text on Instagram. And I recorded some of the thousands of comments that were full of rage and bile for an article on Medium that we'll link to. This is the opening of the back to yoga era, whether that's a safe thing to do or not at this point. After the pandemic. And this is where we're at. Some of the comments were incredible that came in on Instagram.
Well, we're not after the pandemic. Sorry, Matthew. We're not after the pandemic, though. You know, Julie and I are in Los Angeles where we are masking again. And right, I think the comment section actually, I know we're going to read some off, but actually reflects that, the fact that we're treating it as if it's over. And as I know we'll talk about Annie, smallpox was around for a little longer than a year and a half. So this comment section is truly treating it as if it was either a hoax or over, but neither of those things are true.
Yeah, as were quarantine measures, right? As were quarantine measures back in the heyday of smallpox.
Yeah, well, I mean, looking through the comments, we have bite-sized yogini saying, what a disappointment. Very sad to see such a post coming from Yoga Journal. This seems like an agenda push. As yogis, shouldn't we want to care for our bodies? In what way is injecting ourselves with a known poison showing ahimsa towards ourselves or others? Complete nonsense. What stood out for you guys?
Samantha J. Loveday, if people cared more about their health in the first place, we wouldn't be here. My body doesn't come second to anyone else's. I shouldn't have to subject myself to poison and carcinogens just because others can't roll with nature's punches. Goodbye, Yoga Journal.
I'm going to read one by Alex Sandoval 85 that I quite like because it fits how I feel about it. This comment section brought to you by doTERRA, High Vibrational Thinking, and the RNC.
Right. Then we have Tai Chi Explorer. Wow, even the yogis are selling out promoting harmful satanic drugs. That's probably the most obvious Save the Children, QAnon crossover comment that leaps out from that page.
Here's one by the drum yogi that I feel is really on point too in terms of some of what we're discussing today, as well as the overall landscape. The virtue signaling is off the charts. This is people's personal choice. It has nothing to do with yoga. Would you publish an article from the opposing viewpoint? For many people, the shot is not the issue. The pressure, the coercion, using any means necessary to pressure people into making a choice they simply aren't comfortable with is the opposite of ahimsa. Do what you want, but stop pressuring people. We've had enough. Also, side note, I'm sick of people glorifying the yamas and niyamas and yogapata as the totality of yoga. Read the Gita. For all of you who lost people due to sickness and old age, that's what it means to be human. It's not dispassionate to see the truth. For one who is born, death is certain. And for the one who is already dead, they're sure to take birth again.
I always wonder why the hardcore yogis who reference the Gita don't read actual history from India during that period and what was happening in the Harappan civilization and one of the first real spreads of disease vectors, because that was the first collection of nation states. So that one person writes an awesome poem, but then that gets taken as historical record, which is not at all what actually happened during that time.
I think it's really interesting how many of the comments, just sort of scrolling through, just getting a feel, just to remind myself now, how many of the comments have taken this aspect that they feel as if the author is trying to make them feel guilty somehow. She's trying to make them feel ashamed. And I think that's a really interesting response, because when you actually look at what she's writing, she is purely talking about herself. And then, saying, I am doing this because this is the principle that I live by. And it's kind of really interesting how many have interpreted that as an attack on them and their values. And this is something I see in anti-vax groups all the time as well, this feeling that, they want to make you feel guilty. They want to shame you into getting the vaccine, which is, I think, has a real correlation, I think, with other kind of more traditional hard right communities as well.
It makes sense and it doesn't make sense, because the implication, the shame response, because the implication from Wolf's article or Terry's article is that she is making a personal choice, but with the caveat that the vaccine is a public health intervention that works if everybody partakes in it. And so, it's like there's a double edge in there. And I can understand why the anti-vax crowd picks up on the second part of it, which is, oh, you're actually implying that for your choice to make sense, I have to do the same thing as well. But for a group of people who really love personal liberty and want to talk about the freedom of choice, they really have a condemnatory attitude towards somebody who's saying, well, it was good for me to do this.
I don't know how yoga, is perceived and practiced in the UK, but in the US, one of the most popular mantras, at least when I began my practice in the 90s and continuing from them, was "May all beings be happy and free." And what this comment section shows is part of what the pandemic has exposed in the American yoga and wellness communities, which is the actual translation for a lot of yogis is "May all beings be happy and free" in the ways that I define happiness and freedom.
Or may I be happy and free.
May I be an island of sovereign happiness and freedom, and you can be too, right? Separate but equal. It's kind of harkens back to apartheid in a way. Like we can all be free together on our little islands of weird.
But I think I think the way in this comment section overall, though, a lot of them are saying, no, your island should be cast away. There's not even that. You can enjoy. Some are like, you can do a vaccine if you want, and I'll have my freedom. But when that first comment that Matthew read about taking, or you might have, Jillian, taking the toxin, like that misperception and the whole concept of vaccine shedding, there is very much of like, let's outcast. This is the island of misfit toys that you need to be on over there, and we'll actually construct a society based on our health sovereignty. Now,
Julian, you saw something similar in Men's Health this week. Is that right?
Yeah, this was almost too good. Men's Health published an article too. They're the world's largest men's brand magazine, and it's kind of in the bro science category that we talk about here with regard to diet and exercise, but they also cover lifestyle and fashion. And their story was warning that anti-vaxxers could be helping to create deadlier variants of COVID. And they similarly just received a fire hose of negative comments. Their Instagram, which tends to average 50 comments or less under each post, had over 8,300 comments under the post just about this article. And most of them were absolutely interchangeable with the Yoga Journal comments, with the exception of, some of the cultural signifiers in terms of whether it's like being a really healthy bro or, being a true yogi. Here's one comment I pulled from their website. Please stop with the fear porn. People vaccinated are still getting SARS-CoV-2, and more than 10,000 deaths reported to VAERS is only a fraction of the true numbers of deaths. Harvard study showed VAERS only reports 1% of the real numbers. you just lost one subscriber. And that's a common theme across both of these posts for these different magazines, right? Is that people saying, because you have taken a stance that is pro-vaccine, I'm going to turn you off. I'm not going to subscribe. You're losing me as a follower.